Ms. Bush, you are recognized.
Thank you. And I thank you for convening this hearing. In America, the legal shield and court-made doctrine of qualified immunity has allowed police officers to kill Black people with impunity. When a police officer shot a 10-year-old child in Georgia, the 11th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals held that the officer was entitled to qualified immunity. When police officers tased an unarmed pregnant woman in Seattle, a court found that the officer was entitled to qualified immunity. When officers set a man on fire, the Fifth Circuit held that officers involved were entitled to qualified immunity. All of this is happening as our country is reckoning with the reality of record-breaking police killings. There were only 15 days last year in which police officers didn't kill someone. 2021 broke the record for police killings in this country, 1,055 deaths by law enforcement, and that is likely an undercount. St. Louis continues to lead the country year after year in police killings per capita. In a country that is governed by the so-called rule of law, you have to ask yourself, are police officers above the law? Does the Constitution not apply to Black people? Mr. Ago, I believe that true justice is saving lives. Can you please explain why achieving true justice demands that we reconsider the doctrine of qualified immunity?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman Bush. The problem with police misconduct and police violence is that it is meted out against communities of color in a devastating and differential way. And those are facts that we cannot get around. By eliminating qualified immunity, what you do is you start to bring accountability for those situations where police violate the civil rights predominantly and disproportionately borne by people of color. And what that creates is a cycle of trust and safety and better policing, because accountability breeds trust in the system by people who see that officers who violate the civil rights of people, predominantly people of color, when we're talking about the statistics, then when those officers are held accountable, the other members of the community begin to trust that the system works for them and that they begin to then trust policing. It is a cycle that benefits communities of color.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ago. Qualified immunity signals to law enforcement that they can get away with unconstitutional conduct. It is why I'm happy to support Representative Presley's Ending Qualified Immunity Act. And it's why I believe that any comprehensive police reform must include ending qualified immunity. Professor Reiner, in the aftermath of the Civil War, the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist vigilantes violently attacked Black people and infiltrated law enforcement departments across this country, prompting the need for legal protections. Can you talk about the history of qualified immunity and the way in which it is deeply tied to our country's history of enslavement and white supremacy?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the question. And I think the first part of it goes to the premise of your question, which is that the point of the 1871 Civil Rights Act was both to provide a remedy for newly created rights and also to take enforcement of that remedy away from states because of the mistrust that states would actually enforce the Constitution against their own officers. Then we fast forward to the Supreme Court's creation of the doctrine in 1967 was in the context of an arresting of people who were protesting desegregation. It was part of the Freedom Riders. And that's where the court first recognized this good faith immunity. And it was it's a way to undermine all of the goals that the Reconstruction Congress was trying to achieve when it enacted the 1871 Civil Rights Act. And when the court altered the immunity doctrine in 1982 to make it even more protective of police officers and also added all sorts of procedural protections along the way, as my written testimony details, it takes us even farther from enforcing the vision of the Reconstruction Congress, which was to truly enforce these transformative rights after the Civil War.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As lawmakers, we must be dedicated to saving lives, especially Black lives. In order to do that, we must confront and acknowledge the forces of white supremacy that we are up against. The truth is that less than 2% of police officers have been charged with a crime for police killing as a result of qualified immunity. So true justice and true accountability means ending this legal shield. Thank you. And the truth you just heard, I yield back.